relax and stay with us. There's a fresh update on the Dada Joe remix case, and as always, you're tuned into Wicked Blogger Ghana, the only channel that brings you raw, unfiltered, and accurate news. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like, and share this video. You already know when others stay silent. Wicked Blogger Ghana speaks up. Now to the real gist. Dada Joe remix has officially been extradited by the FBI. But there's one major detail many people completely overlooked. He was chained at the waist during the entire extradition process. That single detail has sparked a storm of confusion and debate online. Why would the FBI treat a suspect this way, especially on Ghanaian soil? Is this normal procedure, or is there more to the story? Well, before we unpack that burning question, Wicked Blogger Ghana is here to break down the full background of Dada Joe remix's ongoing case with the FBI, how it all started, where things stand, and what it means for Ghana and beyond. The Dada Joe remix case, FBI, extradition, and global romance fraud. The man behind the name, Dada Joe remix, Joseph Kwadwo Badu Boateng, widely known in Ghana as Dada Joe remix, built an impressive public image for himself. He was often associated with affluence, flashy cars, and branding himself as a businessman with interest in real estate, oil and gas, and entertainment. Dada Joe often shared his wealth through public displays, such as gifting luxury cars to friends. He also presented himself as a champion of youth empowerment in Ghana. Yet behind this polished exterior, U.S. federal authorities claim lay a sophisticated and damaging transnational fraud network that targeted elderly victims across the United States and Canada for over a decade. The fraud allegations, according to the U.S. Department of Justice, Dada Joe remix was one of the central figures in a long-running romance and inheritance scam that operated between 2013 and 2023. The indictment, unsealed by a grand jury in the District of Arizona, accused Boateng and his co-conspirators of orchestrating schemes where elderly victims were manipulated into believing they had inherited vast fortunes or were in relationships with wealthy foreign partners. To claim these non-existent inheritances or assets, victims were persuaded to send large sums of money as supposed taxes, legal fees, or bribes. These payments, often totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars per victim, were then funneled through a complex international laundering system with links to Ghana. The FBI Ghanaian operation and arrest, in a coordinated operation involving the FBI, US, Diplomatic Security Service, and Ghanaian authorities, including the Economic and Organized Crime Office, EOCO Boateng, was arrested on May 28, 2025, in Accra. This followed an official extradition request submitted by the United States. 2 months later, on July 1, he was extradited to the US, where he now faces prosecution. His garage, high-end properties, and lavish online presence had made him a figure of curiosity and admiration, but also suspicion. US. Law enforcement has praised Ghanaian officials for their cooperation, citing this as a model of how cross-border investigations into cyber-enabled financial crimes should work. How the scam worked. These romance and inheritance scams followed a familiar pattern. Fraudsters would contact their victims, usually elderly Americans, through online platforms, posing as wealthy individuals or officials, needing assistance in transferring inheritances or accessing gold reserves. After building emotional trust, the scammers would invent various bureaucratic hurdles requiring payments. Victims were convinced to send money via wire transfer, Bitcoin, or other digital channels. Once received, the funds were laundered through various means, including purchases of luxury goods, real estate, or transfers through shell companies. Dada Joe remix was reportedly instrumental in laundering and redistributing these funds. Other arrests and broader network. Boateng was not acting alone. Several Ghanaians have been arrested or indicted as part of this investigation. These include Isaac Kofi Oduro, known as Kofi Boat, as well as individuals named in indictments from the state of Ohio. Among them were Otto Amponsa, Anna Amponsa, Hannah Adam, Portia Joe, Abdulisaka Asimiu, and others. They were all accused of playing different roles in romance, business, and investment scams targeting Americans. Another group from Ghana and Nigeria, including David Onyinye Abuaneku and Dwayne Asafo Ajay, were also charged in related cases. The pattern of these indictments suggests a highly organized transnational criminal ring, with each member playing a specific part. The reputation fallout, the arrest and extradition of a figure like Dada Joe Remix have sent shockwaves across Ghana's social and entertainment scene. Many have expressed concern about the image this casts on the country, especially given Boateng's high-profile lifestyle and association with Ghanaian celebrities. Some fear that such headlines could lead to increased scrutiny and discrimination against Ghanaians abroad. Others believe it is an opportunity for Ghana to confront the growing problem of cyber fraud and clean up its image. Industry voices have urged entertainers to distance themselves from questionable figures and to be transparent about their sources of wealth. The extradition and legal process. Boateng's extradition followed proper legal channels. Once indicted in Arizona, U.S. authorities filed a request with Ghana for his arrest and extradition. The Ghanaian courts granted the request, and Boateng was handed over to U.S. law enforcement. He now faces charges of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and money laundering, each of which carries a maximum sentence of 20 years in federal prison. If convicted on all counts, he could face decades behind bars. His case is being prosecuted in Arizona, and court proceedings are expected to bring forward extensive evidence, including digital records, financial transfers, and testimonies from victims. Impact on victims and public awareness. This case has highlighted the devastating impact of romance and inheritance scams on victims, many of whom are elderly individuals who have lost life savings. The U.S. Department of Justice marked World Elder Abuse Awareness Day by citing this case as part of its broader efforts to protect older Americans from international fraud. Victims often face financial ruin, emotional trauma, and deep embarrassment. Law enforcement agencies are now urging families and communities to educate their elderly loved ones about such scams and to report suspicious activity immediately. Now, why would the FBI chain Dada Joe Remix around his waist while in handcuffs as if he were a murderer? Why the FBI chain suspects during extradition, what it means? When high-profile suspects are extradited to the United States, it's common to see them transported in chains or shackles. To the public, this imagery can be dramatic. A person surrounded by FBI agents, restrained with ankle cuffs, wrist chains, and waist belts. But what does this mean? Is it an indication of guilt or merely a procedure? Here's a closer look at why the FBI uses restraints during extradition and what it signifies in legal and practical terms. The weight of the charges. Being chained also indicates that the person is facing charges serious enough to warrant international extradition. The US government does not initiate extradition proceedings lightly. It requires a formal request backed by an indictment, arrest warrant, and evidence submitted to a foreign court. Once approved, the suspect is handed over under treaty obligations. So while being in chains doesn't mean the person is guilty, it does show that the charges against them are grave, often involving large-scale financial crimes or conspiracies that cross borders. Security and flight risk. One of the primary reasons the FBI places suspects in chains during extradition is to prevent escape. By the time a person is being extradited to the US, they are considered a flight risk. In most cases, the charges they are facing are serious, ranging from international fraud, romance scams, cybercrime, or even organized crime. With that in mind, US law enforcement assumes that the individual may try to evade justice at any opportunity. The use of restraints, including shackles and belly chains, is therefore a preventive measure to ensure that the suspect cannot flee, resist arrest, or cause disruption during transportation, particularly on flights or in airports. Public and officer safety. Aside from preventing escape, the FBI also uses chains to protect everyone involved in the transport process. Whether it's the law enforcement agents, airline staff, or members of the public, authorities must minimize any risk posed by the suspect. Even if the person being extradited has no history of violence, standard procedures assume the worst to ensure the safety of all. This cautious approach is especially critical when suspects are transported on commercial flights, where close contact with civilians cannot be avoided. A standard operating procedure, contrary to what many people think, the use of shackles during extradition is not unique to violent criminals or hardened offenders. It is part of a uniform transportation protocol used by the FBI, US Marshals, and other federal agencies. Whether someone is accused of drug trafficking, fraud, or computer hacking, they are subject to the same treatment during movement from one country to another. The law makes no distinction based on the type of crime when it comes to transport security. The purpose is to ensure total control over the suspect and avoid any unforeseen complications. What it means legally. It's important to understand that in the United States, the principle of innocent until proven guilty still applies even if someone is in chains. The use of restraints is not a judgment of guilt, but rather a reflection of the standard operating procedure and the seriousness of the situation. The law presumes that any person being transported under federal authority could pose a risk regardless of their background or demeanor. Once the extradited individual arrives in the US, they are brought before a court, informed of the charges against them, and offered the opportunity to enter a plea and seek legal representation. Public perception versus legal reality. For the public, especially when images or videos of the extradition surface, seeing someone in chains might instantly trigger assumptions of guilt. However, that perception is not grounded in law, US. Federal authorities do not use visual restraint for media drama or humiliation. It's about safety, consistency, and legal protocol. Many high-level suspects, including white-collar criminals, have undergone the same treatment, regardless of whether their crimes were violent or non-violent. Conclusion. The image of someone like Dada Joe being chained during extradition may shock some, but it is neither unusual nor necessarily an indicator of guilt. It simply means that the FBI has followed standard law enforcement procedures to ensure safety, prevent escape, and treat the suspect in line with federal custody protocols. What it truly reflects is the seriousness of the charges and the readiness of US law enforcement to bring the suspect to face justice. Until a verdict is reached in court, the suspect remains innocent in the eyes of the law, regardless of how they are transported. And there you have it, the full breakdown of the Dada Joe remix case, the shocking extradition, and why the FBI had him chained even before touching US soil. As always, Wicked Blogger Ghana is here to give you not just the news, but the truth behind the headlines. We'll be following this case closely, and you can count on us to bring you every major twist as it unfolds. If you found value in this video, don't leave without subscribing. Hit that subscribe button, like, share, and let your voice be heard in the comment section below. What do you think about the FBI's approach? Fair or too much? Stay sharp, stay informed, and remember, when the rest keep quiet, Wicked Blogger Ghana speaks out. Until next time, stay safe and stay wickedly aware.